Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. As always, I'm just thrilled about this conversation today because this happened really organically. I met a new friend. I'm about to introduce you to her. And when we had our first conversation together about her upcoming podcast, we ended up just out of nowhere, just slung a sentence at me. And I was like, hang on, you need to come on Big Brave Business so we can talk about it. Little did we know, in the couple of weeks in between us having that conversation and this, my last 2 episodes came out. And I just feel like this is going to really come together really well. Anyways, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Isabel Bagsik from Unconventional Bliss Coaching.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we're going to have this conversation and that you resonated with that sentence. Ooh, suspense. What is the sentence? But I am so excited to get into this with you and just really excited for what is going to come out of this conversation. Just loving your energy and all that you had to share and your values as well.
Oh, thanks. Back at you. And once again, I'm going to reinforce what you all have heard me say week after week, which is we met on Threads. And I feel like, again, I know you've heard me say this, but Threads is a place where I'm really just engaging in conversations with people about these kind of big, brave business related topics where we're just talking about stuff. And I don't feel like, maybe a little bit on LinkedIn, but I don't really feel like these conversations are happening in a two-way or multi-way engaged way on other social media platforms. And so I feel like Threads is just such a cool opportunity because that's literally what happened, right? You saw something on Threads that I had posted, and that's how we connected.
Yeah, I've also been seeing how amazing Threads has been for these kind of organic connections, conversations, people really not getting distracted by visuals. So as a designer, I love visuals, but there's also space and a need to be able to showcase your perspectives, your philosophy, your opinions, your personality, and not getting that washed out by other things and letting that shine through and having people just organically connect. And it really feels, I hope it doesn't change, but it really feels like this really lovely community of people wanting to support each other, share resources, pitch each other, all these things. So yeah, so that's how we connected.
Yeah, I love that. And so when we were talking, the phrase that you said, and I don't want to mess it up, but it's a concept and we're going to dig into the concept. So this is not a direct quote. Well, maybe it is, but if so, that was just luck. But you mentioned sort of like in the midst of a bigger, you were in flow, right? And you mentioned the capacity to give consent to be visible. There's a lot of concepts in that phrase. We've got capacity, we've got consent, and we've got visibility. And I feel like working backwards, like kind of anybody who is in business, in entrepreneurship in 2026 is having conversations about visibility. We've started to touch on, although I'm looking forward to getting into it more, consent to visibility. And then we've got this added layer of like the capacity to give consent, or the capacity to what's the right verb there? Is give consent? Is that what help?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think what I was playing around with or having conversations around with folks in my field has been like, how can you increase your sense of safety within yourself to feel seen? And yeah, I think definitely consent is a big part of that, because if you don't feel safe to provide consent for yourself to be seen, to provide consent, for others to see you, having that agency and empowerment around that act, then if you don't have that, it limits how you actually allow yourself to show up, to share yourself, share your voice, share your face, and so on. So I'm excited to dive into that because I know you've been having conversations around that as
Yeah,
well.
actually, such a good call out because you're right. You didn't say consent. You said safety. I made that about consent. You said
What's related?
yeah, obviously. I guess so. So you
Yeah.
actually said the capacity to be safe to be visible. And I do think that differentiation does matter. So yeah, I guess let's just talk about it. Like what does yeah, tell me more about what that means for the capacity to feel safe, to be visible.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but a lot of people that I've connected with, all of my peers, this it starting your own business is this huge spiritual initiation of what you're here to teach is what you need to practice yourself so deeply. And it can feel really difficult and challenging to have to face those shadows or those challenges. And that's how you're able to teach it. So for me, as someone who is educated and has been in professional industry around design, marketing, social media, visibility, it was difficult to apply that and practice that myself. But what I've come to reflect on to grow and expand my own visibility and make it not feel so hard and actually feel fun and easy and actually see momentum and tangible evidence of doing that has been feeling more safe in my body to know that I can receive, whether it's receiving more money, receiving praise, receiving more followers, whatever that is, it's really going back to, for me, feeling more safe in my body to be seen in a way that actually wants to be seen. The version of me that has been desiring to be expressed, but I've been holding that back. I've been diluting that. I've been making myself palatable. I've been trying to fit myself into certain boxes that I was taught, these strategies or these versions of an online service provider that is often seen with huge followings that doesn't quite align with where I actually want to become. And so a lot of it for me has been tied back to where is this stemming from? Part of it is ancestral, where my ancestors from the Philippines, especially the women in my lineage, just not feeling safe to rock the boat, to really think about what is it to have safe, stable jobs or not break up the family, not share your mental health struggles because you need to be strong, like all these different facets around. I've reflected on how my ancestors have navigated their lives. I've had to untangle from that, acknowledge and appreciate them and give love, but acknowledge, okay, now that I am aware of where all of this is, a lot of this is stemming from myself, even with my parents, how can I rewrite that story now that I have resources and the capacity and the space and time and energy to change that narrative because of all the sacrifices they've done? How can I now create a new way of living? And so part of that is this gratitude of being able to embrace my creativity in a way that they didn't get to before. And with that, how can I become more bold in sharing that part of me instead of shaming that part as, oh, it's not good enough or it's not correct. It's not a conventional kind of job or career that my culture sees and whatnot. And so, yeah, all of these different parts of me I've been reflecting on and trying to give love to. And it truly felt painful in the last year, just trying to reignite my relationship to my creativity. And it took different small practices community support, peer support, mentorship to guide me back to this feeling of safety to create and to share that and trust that that is actually the key for my pathway towards abundance and a thriving, sustainable career. And I'm actually seeing that now really take off because I've taken that risk of what we've been socialized to believe of struggle and hard work. That's the only way to receive abundance and success. And it was actually harder to do the quote unquote easier thing because it didn't feel safe to do that. So I'll pause there for now.
So interested in all of this. And I want to I guess zoom in a little bit on the ancestral exploration, because I do think this is something that's so fascinating. I if you've listened to this podcast, especially since the beginning, you know that my exploration with kind of the more spiritual side, or the more what people call woo, which I really hate that expression, but like that side of things, that's not my comfort zone. And it's not typically where I operate. I have had some guests on this podcast who have become some of my like closest business friends who operate almost completely on that side of things. And so I've dabbled a little bit in this exploration of ancestrally what gets passed down. And so even if you want to take the kind of scientific debate out of what gets carried on, what is imprinted on your DNA, those kind of things, even if you want to take that out, although I think that's very interesting, just the very simple, like accessible understanding of what someone's lived experience was influenced how they parented, what they were scared of, what they were angry about, what they were concerned about, the things that the most raw survival emotions that went into the way they parented. Of course, that affected who their child became. Now, that influenced then in turn, in addition to their own lived experience, how they were raised influenced how that person went on to parent their children, and so on and so forth. So being able to look at what were the lived experiences of my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, however far back you know in your family story, can really help shed some light, especially when you can go in reverse of like, I can see how this showed up for this generation and that showed up for this generation, and I can see the imprint, right? Whether or not you are into like the literal imprint on your DNA of these things. I do think both things, personally, I think the nurture versus nature, it's both, right? I do think that both of those things are valid and show up in this way. But I find this really fascinating. And I think one of the things that I kind of struggled with in a coaching conversation at the beginning of my business is I had a coach tell me something about the way I was doing things. I don't even remember details, was a trauma response. And I was like from what trauma? And she was like, oh, like, let's look at your childhood, right? Getting all therapy-esque. And I was sort of like, I had a pretty privileged and safe childhood. Now, that said, not to say like kind of what she went into is like everybody experiences trauma, big T trauma, little T trauma, like the comment somebody made to you in the hallway at school can still cause a trauma response, blah, blah. Like not to say that blah, blah is and that doesn't matter. But I kind of grappled a little bit with have this like traumatizing event in my childhood, like I could point to other people in my life who did have things like that made it easy to see, like, I see this connection. Who did? My mother had a very traumatizing experience in her childhood. Well, and of course that showed up for me, right? She also had a pretty traumatizing pregnancy with me. So that's also going to very much show up in my earliest imprint of who I became, like what my idea of safety was as a child was brought on by how my mom showed up in that moment, right? And so I think being able to look at these family stories and see is very, very interesting, especially when you know enough about your family story to know what makes your family story interesting, like you were sharing, right? So I think that's really fascinating. And there's something about, and you kind of touched on this too, just having awareness of that suddenly makes it easier to rewrite.
Mhm. Yeah, I love what you shared. And yes, just that step of awareness and declaring it makes it less like this looming unknown entity that is blocking you or just creating this heaviness with this clarity around what it is that you're facing or grappling with. Now you can start creating these steps working towards how can you release that. And it may not be easy, but at least you now know what to work towards. And not to say that there's an end goal, that you're done with healing, that I think it comes in layers. I'm going to continue facing different levels of these thresholds or initiations around wanting to expand my visibility as I continue growing and hitting these ceilings. But the more that we are in that practice of now we know what steps to take towards releasing certain blocks or fears or whatnot, it gets easier each time. The comeback or the bounce back is shorter each time. So yeah.
Well, that's reassuring. I also want to dig in a little bit. So you just used the word visibility, but really, you actually said safe to be seen. And when you were describing your own experience, like where that phrase came from anyway, I realized you said seen, I said visible. So once again, I like took the phrase that you said and twisted that actual word choice. And I want to dig into that. Is there a difference between seen and visible, or are they synonyms in what we're talking about?
That's such a good question. I feel like I've been interchanging that myself.
Okay.
And so that's such a great question in terms of something I want to reflect on too. And I'm live processing here with
Yeah, yeah,
you.
yeah.
Like,
Same.
I feel like it could be synonyms, but it could be interesting to see what is the difference because being visible can look different ways. And then being seen, I feel like visibility, I'm tying it to a lot of like marketing or strategy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And seen, seen feels more like on the emotional, energetic. Like, okay,
Personal.
you hear me, yeah, but can you really see what I'm trying to do, or really
Yeah.
see the essence of
Yeah.
my intentions?
Yeah.
So that might change, but that's what's
Yeah.
coming up
Yeah.
right now.
What's coming up for me, similar. Seen feels intimate. Seen is about intimacy. I want to be able to be safe if I'm going to be intimate with somebody. And intimacy looks like all kinds of things, right? Like the intimacy of somebody truly seeing and knowing you
Mhm.
is different than being visible. I think being visible feels more, I mean, it could be performative, but, and that's where I think those two words can be synonymous. Like if you want to be visible as the person you really are, then you want
Mhm.
to be visible and seen. But visible to me is bringing up more that like the general, can people see me? Can people see this, right? And so it's putting it out there to be seen, whatever it is. And then to be seen feels like, yeah, like that intimate, like who am I really?
Mhm.
Like what energetically, etc. That's kind of, I don't know if that distinction is making sense to anyone else, but that's kind of what's coming up for me. And I do think both things are true, but I do think they're like slightly different. And where this matters is being safe to be visible and being safe to be seen aren't necessarily the same thing. I think being safe to be seen could be like just you and me right now not recording. Are we safe to be seen by each other? And that's a two-way question, right? And then I think recording this conversation is, am I safe to be seen posting it publicly on the internet? that's that's visibility, right? And so I think those are our two layers to how this would show up in business. And so, yeah, I kind of want to take it back there, and then I want to get to the capacity piece, but I want to take it back there for the sake of business. You mentioned like visibility as a strategy, et cetera, but both of those kind of concepts of like creating intimacy with people and also being visible so that you can market, right? Like
Mhm.
both of those things matter. People have to know your business exists in order to, but how does this show up in business? How does safety, seen, and visibility, what does that have to do with running a business?
Ooh, how much time you got? Just kidding.
About 28 minutes.
Good. Okay. So, was it intimacy, being seen, and visibility? Are those the three
That's
words?
yeah, that's but whatever comes up. I don't know. We're free flowing.
Okay. So I feel like in terms of marketing and your business, the what I've been reflecting on in my experience and from a lot of spaces I've been learning from as well is that if we, especially those who are compassionate, who have these heart-led values, want to bring that into their work, can we reframe marketing as relationship building and creating a sense of intimacy for people to feel like, oh, I feel seen and I trust this person so much that I will invest money and my time to work with them, to hire them. And so how do we create that sense of intimacy? And reframing in that way for me feels really exciting instead of this churning of content that is thinking of people as numbers instead of if I were to imagine them in a room where I can be with them and feel their energy and really feel excited by really helping them, guiding them with my own knowledge and my own experience. And thinking about being seen, can I help them feel seen in the way that I write, in the way that I market, in the way that I show up and share my stories and share my expertise, and framing that in a way that shows them I understand them, I see you, and laying out how your skills, how your offerings can genuinely support them from their challenge, from the problem to their desired goal. And invisibility and thinking that is how you reach more people to enter into your space and see, oh, this is a person for me. I feel this intimacy. I feel seen. And I see them, and the visibility will help you get towards welcoming in more folks into your world and helping you reach this mission-based business or this heart-led business to be a sustainable work that you do to help more people.
A couple things that came up for me, and then I want to dig into the safety part, but a couple things that came up for me is thinking, yeah, my initial thought was if people can see me, then they feel more connected to me. Certainly that's where when I truly let the people that I work with or the people that I could work with like really see me, that feels authentic, that feels real, that feels connective. And that's really important as a service provider running a small business, especially if you're a sole proprietor, right? Like that, like a solopreneur, that's really gonna be such an important key. But as soon as I had that thought, I went to, but actually really what breeds the connectivity is if the other person is seen. If I see the person I'm working with, and you really said that in I want my writing, my marketing, etc., to ensure that the person who you want to work with feels seen in that, like if you can show I see you, that's going to actually create a bigger sense of connection than if people can see me. It's both. But I had that thought, and then you said it and I was like, oh, that hits. I think too, visibility is like putting yourself out there to be seen. So it's like the act of putting yourself out there to be visible, and someone can buy without being visible, but you can't really sell without being visible. So you kind of have to put yourself out there to be seen, to see and be seen. That's like visibility. And both of those things, to be safe to do those things, is layered. So I want to kind of like get into, first of all, what does it look like and what does it take to be safe, to be visible? But then also, you don't get to decide if you're safe for other people. So how can you try to foster a sense of safety for people you're working with or want to work with so that they can be seen? How do you, both of those things? Those are two really big concepts.
Yeah. So through the lens that I'm approaching that in my work as a brand guide, as a visibility guide, and with my background in design and marketing and social media, is thinking about how you can craft this visual online presence that can do all of that work for you immediately. First impressions, your values, your frequency, your energy can be felt through your brand identity, through the way that you share your photos of your own face, of your own self. How does that all come together to create this brand ecosystem, this world that you're welcoming folks into? And there's this sense of relatability or comfort or excitement, different kinds of energies that you might want to evoke in someone that you ideally want to work with and welcome in can be crafted with such immediacy in your visual presence and your branding and how you're showing up. And there are so many factors around what this brand ecosystem is, from your brand photos to your brand colors, to your fonts, to what your website and your graphics look like. And so having that cohesive across your platforms that you have creates a sense of safety. Like, oh, this person knows they know who they are. There's certainty around their work. Or even like, oh, I can see them and I feel seen, or I feel excited to connect with them more and learn more from them, whether it's like because they're sharing their voice and their perspectives through videos instead of hiding behind only stock photography, for example. You can sense someone's confidence in how they're speaking to their services, their offerings as well, and so on. So there's so many facets around that. But I think, and I'm not sure if I'm like going on a tangent now, but I feel like some of those parts around being visible in the literal visual branding sense can create that sense of safety again to trust, invest, and get paid by people who enter your world and find you. Because again, if you are hiding behind stock photography or hiding behind uninspiring online presence, and that makes you uninspired, that creates this ripple or this loop of feeling uninspired, feeling like a lack of excitement around your work. You're not going to want to show up as much. You're not going to want to talk about your work as much. Or maybe there's an embarrassment of like, you don't feel like your online presence is matching the depth of your work. And thus your people can't find you. And it continues on and on until you make that change.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I hadn't even gone to like brand visuals and how, but I guess that's like probably even like kind of branding 101 from generations of figuring this out, right? That's why brand standards ever mattered. And so I guess that's not like a wild hair idea, but yeah, it hadn't even occurred to me. It's so interesting because I think the safety, creating safety for other people, some of what you were talking about, I think what comes up for me is, especially on kind of a micro scale of seen versus visibility, right? Is I think also willing to be vulnerable. And I think that's one of the things about this podcast that I really love, and podcasting in general, is that it gives us an opportunity to really be vulnerable. And it's sort of like we're willing to go first. And then the person listening gets invited in of like,
Mhm.
hey, you can come share here, right? And sometimes when I've guests on, I mean, you jumped right in, and maybe because you have worked on your own like psychological safety, and maybe because we've talked before, right? This isn't the first time that we're talking, it's the second. So it's still pretty
Yeah.
early. But
Yeah.
but maybe there's some layer there. But I feel like even just the conversation we had before we hit record, right, to create a little bit more of a sense of safety to share. But I think sometimes when someone comes on, especially if we've just met for the first time, I'm like, let me get vulnerable first. And that hopefully invites the other person into like, oh, I'll match that energy. And so I think that also by showing up with visibility in an authentic way, where if people can, Sarah said on last week's episode, people can tell what's fake. So if you're showing up in a real authentic way, it invites the other person to let you see them because they feel like they can see you with your visibility. So I think that's interesting. Okay. So how does your bandwidth contribute to safety?
Ooh, that's a big one. And I think that bandwidth, are you equating, at least for me, I see bandwidth and capacity as synonymous. Is
Yeah.
that okay? Okay.
That yes. I think for the most part, yes. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So I think in terms of how that
Yeah, because
affects,
you said capacity, not bandwidth. So I did
I
that again.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think like I just wanted to make sure that that was,
Yes,
I'm assuming
that is
correctly.
what I meant. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think bandwidth capacity around being, was it being seen? Is that correct?
Yeah. The capacity to be safe, to be seen.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
that's what you actually said. And then yeah, we've taken it
got
all
it.
kinds of places.
We're just saying the word seen and visible like
I
every other
know.
show. I'm like, which one is it again? But okay. So bandwidth, capacity around your safety to be seen. I think it could very much vary day by day depending on how people's mental health shows up, like how their energies show up. Sometimes you just, something comes up and you want to be a hermit, or something is, some life change occurs, some life milestone or event happens, and you need to hide away and take care of your energy and resource yourself. So it's not to say that you need to be visible and post online every single day, every single like hour or whatnot. It's checking in with your energy and with what you're able to share. Maybe sharing yourself, being seen can look it like different forms, whether it's showing your face, whether it's your words, whether it's your voice, whether it's a sentence on threads, whether it's a pre-scheduled email that you don't have to show up for that day and you can reserve your energy and take care of life things. So I think creating these, thinking about your capacity, your bandwidth, and reflecting on how much you want to share and what you're comfortable with or what you want to be a little edgy with in your comfort levels. How can you reflect on that and then start and kind of reverse engineer? Okay, this is what my capacity is. You might be a parent. You might be struggling with certain physical health things, mental health things, and see, okay, this is how much time I want to dedicate, or this is how much creative energy I have each day. And think about the different formats or platforms that do allow you to show up in a way that fits with your lifestyle, and think about then the cadence that you want to show up there. And not to say that you, again, like you need to show up in every single platform either. Can you pick one to two that can fit into your schedule, into your lifestyle, and experiment with that? And if you increase your capacity and energy there, you can add on more platforms. But that's what I've shared with past clients, and that's what I continue to reflect on for myself as well.
Yeah, yes. I'm reflecting as you're talking on, is there a difference between your capacity to be safe and your capacity to be seen?
Mm.
Right? Like, does adding that layer of safety in between, because
Mhm.
capacity to be seen or capacity to be visible is one thing, but your capacity to be safe, is that a whole other layer, or is whether or not you have the capacity to be seen or visible always dependent on whether or not you have the capacity to be safe? And I think I would say that I sometimes we have the capacity to be visible or we have the capacity to be seen, but that doesn't mean we have the capacity to be safe. And this is really fascinating to me. And I think this is why when you said it, I reacted the way I did, where I was like, I want to like really spend some time reflecting on this. Basically, if you're listening, basically what I kind of treat this podcast as is like my verbal journal of like, what do I want to reflect on? What do I want to dig into? And like, will a friend do this with me or a group of friends?
I
Right.
love, yeah.
So I think what's coming up for me is that sometimes, and I can think of a specific instance last year where my mental health was really not in a good place. I was taking a medication that I've talked about this, I think, a little bit on the podcast, but I'm not positive. If so, here's a story. I was taking a medication that caused a like manic depressive episode, like a pretty serious health crisis. And I was on a business trip and I was alone in a hotel room at the time that this happened, this trigger happened. And thankfully, I was in touch with my mom and she recognized what was going on as it was happening. And so she was able to articulate to me, which again, kind of just being aware of what was happening already made it safer. But then also she was like, get off the medicine right away. Right. And within 24 hours, I did feel better. Now, that said, I was supposed to attend a board meeting virtually as this was all kind of coming to a head. And I did have the time. I did have the energy. I had the resources. I definitely could have still signed on to that meeting. And honestly, those people in that room are people I probably could trust. They would want to be a safe space for me. They would probably have rather I was there than not be there and instead be alone in a hotel room. That's probably, but was I safe to be seen in that moment by those people? Like, they're not my close personal friends or family. They're not, right? Like, probably not, right? That's not really how I want to be visible either. So, like, that's not the visibility impression I'm looking to give. I think authenticity matters. And I also think your safety matters. So, not all things need to be visible. And if it's not safe for it to be visible, that doesn't make you not authentic. That
Mhm. Yeah.
means you're prioritizing your safety, right? And so I think this is really interesting because I think about like survival mode, right? The person who is struggling to pay their mortgage, or literally like they are unhoused, or they are working several jobs. They're trying to figure out how to get dinner on the table. We could even get really primal about it and be like, someone being chased by a tiger. Like, right? Like, you're literally just as unsafe as you could be. Could that be visible? Sure. And at the same time, it doesn't need to be. And so I think, like, what I'm curious is how can we, or can we, influence our capacity to be safe?
Yeah.
Because we can increase our capacity to be visible, but how can we increase our capacity to be safe?
Yeah. I think there are a few different ways and some things that I've practiced myself or have been trained in is one really accessible way that can be really helpful in wherever you're at is can you literally check around your physical surroundings to let yourself remember and remind your brain, hey, in this very moment, there's no tiger chasing
Tiger.
you. There is nothing like running at you, like we're literally looking side to side, front and behind you, wherever space you're in. Okay, can help just remind your brain, like, okay, and your body then you are safe in this moment. And connecting with your breath and deepening your inhales and your exhales, like that can also help slow down because oftentimes when we get nervous, we have shallow breathing. Can we bring more oxygen to your brain and ground ourselves in that way to have clear thinking, to be able to reflect and make better decisions from there to know like, oh, I need to call someone for support or I need to stop doing this action or whatnot. Can we, what are these really accessible actions that you can do no matter where you're at to ground your body, connect and slow down, and to be able to know how you can support yourself if you are in a space where you don't have access to someone to get immediate support. So these are just a couple different ways to help with increasing safety. I'm sure there's so many more. I'm not a health professional, so I wanted to name that disclaimer, but just from some of the meditation training and somatic practitioner trainings that I've been in, these are some really simple ways that I might invite folks into practicing.
Yeah, I love that. Some really good grounding techniques. And I think also I'm reflecting on some of the other conversations I've had recently, one that'll come out next week. When it comes to like physical health, I think there is something to be said for like checking in with yourself about what are the things you can control. So like, yes, there is no tiger if I look around, but I also can look around and say like, what would make this feel safer?
Right.
And for me right now, I can look around and see there's a stack of actually old scrapbooks on my desk that's taking up like a huge amount of space, and it feels very cluttered and overwhelming. And that is a trigger to my nervous system. It's in my periphery the entire time I'm talking to you, right? And so like, what could I do to make this space have a bigger capacity for safety? I
Mm.
could clean that up, right? Put that away and get it organized. And that's going to really help make this space an even more productive environment, right? I would say also for your physical health, like, what are the things that you need? Like, what is your body telling you it needs? Does it need water? Does it need rest? Does it need sunlight? Does it need, right? Like what does it need in order for you to have an increased capacity for safety? Because if those things, like before I started recording this morning, this is a day of podcast recordings for me. Before I started recording, I was having some asthma issues and I stopped. And right before I hit record, and I said, before we hit record, I should just take my inhaler. Like, it's gonna be a long day of talking. That's what my body is obviously telling me it needs. Right. And so I think like things like that. And the last thing I kind of want to just circle back to is that I led off with the word consent, and we kind of called out, wow, that must have been a psychological nod to something that I need in order to feel safe. So I
Mhm.
want to also kind of say, in the spirit of being seen, what came up for me in distinguishing that from visibility is that seen is intimacy.
Mhm.
Consent to be intimate matters. So if people are telling you, you should show up on social media every single day, you should show your face, you should whatever the advice is for like being visible to market your business as a strategy, right? You should be doing this, blah blah blah. If somebody's telling me this is the expectation, this is what you need to do, this is what's expected of you, I didn't get an opportunity to consent to that's something that I want to do. And I'm choosing to invite people in, number one, overall, but number two, in this moment, I'm choosing to invite people in to be intimate with me, to be seen. And I think that in the same way, any kind of intimacy requires like really explicit consent, right?
Mhm.
If we want to be intimate, as in we want people to see us, we want to be seen, then I think that's what's coming up for me, and why consent was that word that sort of subconsciously came out thinking of safety, is that think I think that's something I haven't really given myself the opportunity to explore before now, is like, you know why? One of the things I think I'm struggling with like social media visibility, I don't think that I've given consent to my own, like, building a social media. Anytime I've tried to build a social media strategy or gotten advice or gotten input, or my teams put stuff together, like, I'm not consenting to that. And how much would it change things if I did a little check-in with myself of like, what do you consent to be seen today? And would that increase my capacity for safety? I feel like yes. So I feel like we've kind of unlocked something for me that I'm excited to sort of explore. Like, what if I get to consent to showing up on stories before I show up on stories every day? Instead of feeling like I'm supposed to, I have to, this is what's expected of me. This is what anybody else would think. This is my business will suffer if I don't, right? Like, you could substitute lots of other synonyms in those sentences for like marriage or relationships or like sex. And that's typically what we have accepted consent for. But consent is for all forms of intimacy. And I just think that's like a really
Mm.
interesting subconscious thread that, yeah, like, yeah, how does consent play into that? Anyways, I feel like we could talk all day
Yeah.
about these topics. And that's why I was like, I knew I had to have you on. I do feel like since I forgot this was what I invited you on to talk about and I had come up with an alternative thing, I feel like you should, if you want to, come back and we can do a part 2 and we can dig into more things. I think with like the work that you do and the type of training that you do and just the different lived experiences and perspectives you have in your business, we could continue to have some really, really good conversations. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We definitely got through so much. And from some of the things that we brought up can be their own episodes. So to do a part 2 or explore a different topic, like,
Yeah.
let's see what is alive for us in that time we reconnect. But thank you so much, Sarah, for
Yeah,
having me.
thank you. If you want to connect with Isabel, because of course you do, and also not only could you connect with well, really both of us on Threads, but also Isabel is working on a podcast, you guys. So if you want to connect with her, her bio, her links, all of that information is going to be in the description and the show notes. And mine too, of course. And we'd love to hear from you. We want to hear from you about what this brought up for you. What are some things this might unlock for you? What are you reflecting on? What do you wish you could have contributed to the conversation? What other funny synonyms did you notice that we swapped for certain words that we may not have even noticed that we did? I'm very curious. So come and talk to us on whatever platform floats your boat, and we would love to chat about it. But all that information is in the show notes. And in the meantime, thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week.